Welcome back to The Critique. So, the material today is a JTV video trend.
Right.
It's analyzing that leaked internal announcement from Daily Wire CEO Jeremy Boring about Candace Owens' contract being terminated.
And framing it as a moment of moral clarity for them.
Exact. And, my first impression is that the foundation of this piece is really, really strong.
Oh, yeah.
The quotes they pull from Boring's speech are accurate, they're in-depth, and they're powerful.
That factual foundation is solid. I mean, using Boring's own words is the core strength. You're right. It makes the case for moral clarity because you're getting it straight from the source.
It's not just opinion.
Not at all. And you pull out these specific, really potent examples, the whole blood libel thing, the Nick Fuentes connection, the contract details. It gives the piece immediate weight.
But,
and this is the big question, once you have that amazing material, how do you deliver it for the most impact?
right.
And that's where we need to look closer at the structure and the flow of the piece itself.
So the content is 5-star, but the packaging, the delivery mechanism, is making it less effective than it could be.
Precisely. And that's the first big thing we need to talk about. The strategic placement and, frankly, the significant length of the donation appeal severely disrupts the material's critical momentum and flow.
It's the biggest structural problem, for sure.
It really is.
I saw it immediately. The host introduces this huge controversy, plays just the very beginning of the CEO statement.
The hook.
The hook, where he says they terminated the relationship 15 minutes ago. And then, boom, it pivots.
Right into this long, detailed justification for JTV's existence and, an urgent appeal for money.
And that appeal, it's not short. It goes on for nearly 3 minutes.
And that's the weakness. What you've essentially done is create this huge structural gap right at the moment the audience is leaning in the most.
You've got them hooked.
Totally. You gave them the firing, you promised them a why, but then you make them sit through a whole fundraising pitch before they get the actual evidence.
He even says it. I'm going to show you the full clip in a second, but before I do,
Yeah.
I have to say something important, and that's just fatal to momentum.
It really is. The audience is there for one thing. The controversy, the explanation, they're engaged, and now they just feel like they're being made to wait. And that frustration can lead to people just clicking away. You lose all that analytical thrust when you interrupt the evidence.
The whole point that the leak actually vindicates the Daily Wire, it loses its punch because the proof is all fragmented and delayed.
So the suggestion for improvement here is simple, but it's absolutely necessary. You have to reorient the structure to prioritize the analysis.
Get to the meat first.
Get to the meat first. Present the key evidence when the audience is most engaged. You have to earn the ask. You use that emotional and analytical peak to then transition into the call for support.
So we need to flip the sequence completely.
Exactly.
As a concrete example, instead of stopping after that first little clip of Boring,
Yeah.
you need to play the full, crucial segment of his speech right there. Let the audience absorb just how serious the contractual violations were, because that's the actual story.
Absolutely. Show them the specific examples. Let them hear boring detail, Candace Owens liking that post about the bloodline.
Which is just shocking.
It's shocking. And then the bizarre Fresh and Fit podcast thing with the cha-ching cash register sound.
And the whole Andrew Tate interview context. All of that evidence creates this necessary emotional and intellectual weight.
And once the audience gets the high stakes of what the Daily Wire was dealing with, then, and only then, does the mission of JTV feel immediately urgent.
It feels justified. So after you've discussed the full weight of that evidence, that's when you can place the fundraising section.
Right.
The urgency then feels like a direct response to the issues you just detailed, not some, generic interruption.
You're not just asking them to support a cause in general.
No, you're asking them to support the fight against the exact named examples they just heard. That shift is huge. It respects the audience's time.
And their intellectual investment.
Okay, so moving on from that, I want to talk about the setup of the piece, because while the evidence later on is, like we said, incredibly strong, I felt the opening setup was a little weak. It could be sharper.
I agree. To maximize the impact of that really powerful, legally grounded explanation from the CEO, the opening commentary needs a much tighter analytical focus on how his speech directly counters that exposé narrative.
Because that's what the leak was meant to be, right? An exposé.
It was meant to harm them. So your analysis has to be razor sharp from the very beginning.
And what happens now is that the opening quickly pivots from the fact that it was a leak into these very broad moral generalizations.
Yes, things like utterly sick and totally vindicates.
Right. All before the facts are really on the table.
And that's the weakness. The initial commentary risks sounding purely subjective, just a moral judgment.
Like you're just telling them what to feel.
Exactly. Instead of using the unique institutional facts from the leak itself to just dismantle the exposed claim piece by piece. If the leak was meant to paint the Daily Wire as, malicious or hypocritical,
your first response shouldn't just be outrage.
No, it should be a robust fact check using the information Boring himself provided.
So the suggestion is to dedicate a little more time right up front to synthesizing that core leak versus moral clarity, and do it by spotlighting the specific details that give the decision real institutional and contractual weight.
You have to make the argument intellectually solid from the first 30 seconds.
It elevates the whole discussion.
It really does. It moves it from just a moral feeling to a robust, fully explained organizational decision, which, by the way, aligns perfectly with the goal of showing their moral clarity.
Right, which in this case means they operated with integrity and legal rigor.
For sure. And for concrete examples, you have this phenomenal information in Boring speech that just needs to be brought forward immediately.
Like what?
Well, explicitly emphasizes structural details. The point that, and I'm quoting here, the Daily Wire, contrary to public opinion, is not owned by Jews. In fact, the majority of it is owned by Christians.
That's critical. You have to foreground that.
It's such a crucial piece of the counter-narrative. It just immediately neutralizes that lazy anti-Semitic accusation the leak was pushing.
That this was just the Jews silencing people.
Exactly. By mentioning the majority Christian ownership, you frame the decision as a broad corporate stand on morality and contracts, not some targeted ethno-religious move.
And you can't bury the contract detail. The fact that the clause about not tarnishing the brand was suggested by Owens' own attorney after the Kanye West situation.
That's just gold.
Pure gold.
It's the final nail in the exposed coffin. Bringing that forward immediately frames the whole thing as a legal termination based on a contract they both agreed to.
Not some spontaneous act of cancel culture?
The decision becomes inescapable, not just commendable. And those facts, presented right at the top, give the audience the intellectual confidence to follow the rest of the analysis.
So the opening needs to be surgically precise. Use Boring's own context to neutralize the leak's intent before you even dive into the full controversy.
Exactly. It makes the entire piece feel smarter and more authoritative.
All right, let's circle back to the fundraising appeal for a minute, specifically the content of it. Because even if we fix the placement, we still need to make sure the messaging itself is as sharp as the analysis.
I completely agree. The highly detailed fundraising appeal, while it does a good job explaining what donations fund, relies way too heavily on abstract urgency. It could be so much stronger by integrating specific, concrete references from the controversy you just analyzed.
The weakness right now is that it lists all these important functions, funding research, cameras, creativity.
All good things.
All good things, but they're kept generic. They're separate from the immediate explosive content of the Owens firing. You're telling the audience the Jewish voice needs to get stronger because anti-Semitic voices aren't just coming from one place anymore, but that stays kind of abstract.
It becomes a generic public service announcement instead of what it should be, a specific war chest appeal tailored to the current fight.
It's a huge missed opportunity. You're not connecting the problem to the solution you're offering.
Right. The audience is thinking, yeah, I agree we need stronger Jewish media, but they aren't thinking, I need to donate right now to specifically combat that cha-ching sound clip.
So the suggestion is to integrate those high-stakes examples from Boring's speech directly into the justification for JTV's mission.
Connect the request for support to the immediate threat environment you just documented in the core content.
That's the key. The analysis provides the perfect case study for the urgency JTV is addressing.
You're not fighting an abstract enemy. You're fighting the spread of rhetoric that uses specific, insidious, and frankly pretty shocking tropes.
So let's get concrete with the appeal language. When you're talking about the goal to bring thoughtful and inspiring Jewish media to a wider global audience, you should explicitly reference how donations combat something like the blood libel.
Yes.
The ancient anti-Jewish accusation that was directly implicated when Owens liked that social media post.
You have to slow down there and really emphasize how severe that is. You could say something like, we need your support because anti-Semitism isn't subtle anymore. more. It's a high-profile figure liking a post that invokes the blood libel.
Suggesting rabbis get drunk on Christian blood.
Exactly. That's why we need funding for research and content to push back against these specific, vile accusations when they surface in the mainstream.
Or you could reference the normalizing of tropes, like that cha-ching cash register sound being played whenever a Jew or Israel is mentioned on a big podcast. That detail is so specific and so gross.
It is, and that's what the funding for research, cameras, and creativity is actually for. It's to combat those exact rhetorical tactics in a compelling way.
And you should use the controversy not just as an example of a good outcome, the firing, but as proof for why this work is so urgently needed.
You can point out that figures like Nick Fuentes, who are celebrating her, are being validated.
The funding is necessary to combat figures who are, in Boring's words, very effective at saying what she wants to say and who are clearly subordinating their beliefs to the people celebrating these views.
So you're asking the audience to fund the immediate fight against the exact problems you just spent 10 minutes detailing.
The request goes from a plea for general support to a necessary investment in combating a documented current threat.
Which is so much more powerful, especially when it's placed right after the emotional peak of the evidence. It transforms the appeal from a kind of mandatory segment into an integral, compelling part of the analysis. It brings the argument full circle.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. To strengthen this, the content is already there. We're really just tackling the structure and the framing.
Right.
To recap, the big actionable suggestion.
First, structure and flow. Resequence the content. Get that full dramatic evidence from Jeremy Boring's speech out there before the detailed fundraising appeal. That's how you maximize momentum.
Second, completeness and focus. Sharpen that initial analytical setup. Use the first 30 seconds to spotlight the key contractual and ownership details.
Elevate the discussion from just moral outrage to a robust, legally backed organizational decision. It immediately defangs the exposed narrative.
And finally, audience alignment and purpose fulfillment. Integrate those specific, high-profile examples of anti-Semitism, like the blood libel or the cha-ching sound, directly into the fundraising pitch itself.
That will underscore the vital, immediate urgency of JTV's mission and give concrete purpose to every single dollar that's requested.
Implementing these 3 changes will ensure the piece is not only factually robust, but also structurally compelling, dynamic, and I think maximally impactful. You have a great piece of analysis here.
You really do.
These adjustments will just help you get the most emotional and analytical payoff for the viewer.
This revised structure will make the audience feel respected, informed, and at the end of the day, motivated to support the fight that you're leading.
Excellent. We look forward to seeing the revised version. Send it back for another critique soon.